The Lib Dems are. Sometimes I would like to dismiss the Lib Dems as not being particularly important, but I think I'm wrong. And I'm wrong because they're now navigating a particularly delicate terrain as they attempt to hold onto their newly acquired historically conservative constituencies ahead of Wednesday's budget announcement, and they are eyeing the prize of becoming the next opposition party when the Conservative Party falls to pieces, which I think is only a matter of time. And Anna Gross's Financial Times article this morning analyzes this situation and presents a compelling snapshot of their balancing act. The Lib Dems are subtly shifting towards the right, especially on taxation policies that risk alienating their newer affluent support base in southern England, while continuing to target large businesses and high net worth individuals in the city. Since the general election, Lib Dems have moderated their approach on taxing the middle and the upper middle class, showing resistance to Labour's proposals to increase employers' national insurance and freeze income tax thresholds, both aimed at raising significant revenue. And their opposition suggests a bid to reassure voters who may be financially comfortable but not excessively wealthy. In many of these constituencies, families are prosperous enough to own homes and occasionally afford private education, and therefore Labour's planned VAT on private school fees and the stamp duty changes are contentious points. Lib Dem leader Ed Davies' opposition to taxing education on principle, something I'm afraid I entirely agree with him, reinforces their defence of a demographic heavily concentrated in private education, especially in the southeast. But I think it's that idea that you don't tax education, whether it's for the rich or the poor. You don't tax education. And in the same way as I equally do not think you tax medicine, whether it's private or whether it's state, whether, medicine and education. People only appeal to the private system because the state system is failing. And no matter how much they stay with the state system is not improving. The state system is not going to cure you of a newfound disease. There isn't the time to invest in supporting the state system in order to do that. It's a generational change that is needed. And if you have the money, then maybe it's necessary to look at alternatives. I think people are marching with their feet. They're either going abroad or they're looking at alternatives to these monolithic systems, because the systems are failing. Now, I think education particularly needs to change fundamentally, and simply throwing money at state education will not solve the problem. And if Labour doesn't want to change education, Labour will fail, in the same way as the Conservatives failed. We need to change the way that education throughout our country is delivered, and we need to lead that educational debate. Education needs to be something, we need to get rid of the old Henry Ford notion of a conveyor belt where your end result is university. We need to think in terms of education preparing students of all ages for flexibility. And we need to recognize that any subject, any topic is acceptable, particularly if it's approached with the same methodologies. So if you approach a study of anime simply as some form of entertainment, then of course you're just whistling in the dark. But if you approach it in terms of an analysis of the storytelling technique and the technologies that are used, then it becomes a very interesting exercise, which is almost in parallel with English literature, with a study of drama, the study of most art subjects. It also has its element of scientific research, because you're looking at the whole business of the mechanics of animation and the deception, the way the eye is so easily deceived by, often in anime, 12 or 7 frames per second, well below the amount that is usual in Western animation. Anyway, it's just a thought. It's something I've been playing with for 20 years or so. Inheritance tax is another area where the Lib Dems tread cautiously, calling for a review rather than the outright support of Labour's proposed extensions. The party claims that inheritance tax disproportionately affects moderately wealthy families while being navigable for the ultra-rich because of loopholes. Again, they're quite right. This stance, however, stopped short of a clear policy direction, as Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper declined to offer alternatives when pressed. That's just being mealy-mouthed and dithering. That is an old Lib Dem problem, and they need to sort themselves out. As they contend with an electorate that holds higher than average home ownership rates and a substantial presence in private education, the Lib Dems aim to avoid punitive measures on what they term the squeezed middle. Their spokesperson reiterated their intent to be the voice for entrepreneurs, small businesses and the squeezed middle, while taking jabs at the Conservatives for their economic record post-Truss budget. Yet, as Steve Akehurst of Persuasion UK points out, the Lib Dems face a critical test. If they tilt too far in one direction, they risk either alienating their newer, affluent supporters or driving the bread-and-butter economic voters back to the Tory heartland. The budget's outcome will likely reveal how tight this political rope is for the Liberal Democrats and whether their centrism can satisfy both ambition and caution. Because I think now is the time for them to prepare, not for government, but certainly for opposition.